How does the tech that runs our world really work? We break it down to its fundamental truths. This is First Principles.
It's the first thing you touch in the morning. An alarm rings, and you reach out in the semi-darkness. Your finger finds the cool, smooth glass of your phone, and with a simple, drowsy swipe, the sound is gone. A moment later, you swipe again to unlock a universe of icons. You tap, and a conversation with a friend appears. Your thumbs dance across a keyboard made of light, forming words out of nothing. You scroll through an endless feed of images, pinching and zooming on a photo, expanding the world with a casual flick of your fingers. This entire sequence is so automatic, so ingrained, we don't even register it as a process. It just works. The phone feels like a seamless extension of our will, a pane of glass that can somehow read our intent. We assume it's simple, that the screen just feels the pressure of our touch, the way you might feel a tap on your shoulder. But have you ever stopped to wonder how that actually works? What are the fundamental rules that allow a static, solid object to become one of the most responsive interfaces ever created? Because the simple, intuitive answer, the one that involves pressure, is completely wrong. The truth is far more elegant, and it has almost nothing to do with force, and everything to do with a fundamental property of the universe, and of you. Today, we're opening the black box of the one device we all touch every single day. We're going to understand the first principles of the touchscreen. Our journey begins not with what the touchscreen is, but with what it feels like. The sheer genius of the modern touchscreen is its invisibility. It's a technology that succeeds by getting out of the way. Before this, our relationship with the digital world was always through a proxy, a middleman. You had a mouse, a keyboard, a trackball, a stylus. You moved a physical object in the real world to manipulate a cursor, a digital ghost on a screen. There was always a translation, a layer of abstraction between you and the thing you were trying to control. You wanted to click a button, so you moved your hand, which moved a mouse, which moved a pointer, which then finally clicked the button. The touch screen dissolved that distance. Suddenly, the thing you wanted to touch, you could just touch. The icon wasn't a picture of a button, it was the button. A photograph wasn't a static image behind glass. It was a malleable object you could stretch, shrink, and slide with your own fingers. This was a profound shift in human-computer interaction. It was the difference between pointing at a word in a book and actually running your finger along the text. It made computing feel physical, tactile, and deeply personal. This revolution was famously kicked off in 2007, when Steve Jobs walked onto a stage and introduced the first iPhone. He mocked the clunky plastic keyboards and clumsy styluses of the day's smartphones. He presented a device that was just a single clean face of glass, and then he did something remarkable. He swiped his finger to unlock it. He pinched his fingers together, and a photo shrank. He spread them apart, and it grew. The audience gasped. It wasn't just that it was new, it was that it looked like how things should have always worked. The technology was so intuitive that it felt instantly familiar. It was, in his words, like magic, and that magic has since spread everywhere. It's in our cars, on our refrigerators, at the ATM, on the airplane seat back in front of you. The touchscreen has become the default language we use to speak to our machines. But to truly understand the genius of that language, we have to travel back to a time before it existed, to understand the problem it was born to solve. Before the sleek, responsive glass we know today, the world of touch was a very different place. The dream of interacting directly with a screen is actually quite old, dating back to the 1960s. The problem was always the same. How do you make a flat, inanimate object see and report where it's being touched? Early attempts were clever, but clunky. There were screens that used infrared light. Imagine a grid of invisible laser beams crisscrossing the surface of the display. When your finger touched the screen, it would break a horizontal beam and a vertical beam. Like a spy in a heist movie, the system could then figure out the X and Y coordinates based on which beams were interrupted. It worked, but it was imprecise, expensive, and the bezels that housed the lasers had to be huge. Then came the technology that dominated for years, the resistive touchscreen. If you ever used a Palm Pilot, an old GPS unit, or one of those electronic signature pads at the grocery store, you've used a resistive screen. These are the screens that feel a bit mushy. That's because you're literally squishing two layers together. A resistive screen is made of two thin, flexible sheets, separated by a tiny air gap. One sheet has vertical conductive lines, the other has horizontal ones. When you press down with your finger, or more likely, a stylus, you physically push the top layer down until it makes contact with the bottom layer. At the point of contact, a circuit is completed. The device can then measure the electrical resistance in the vertical and horizontal directions to pinpoint the exact location of the press. Resistive touchscreens were a huge step, but they had serious limitations. You had to apply real pressure. A light touch wouldn't do. They only registered one point of contact at a time, making gestures like pinch to zoom impossible. And because you were looking through two layers of plastic and a grid of wires, the screen's image was often dimmer and less sharp. It worked, but it never felt magical. It felt mechanical because it was. You were physically closing a switch. It was a solution, but it wasn't an elegant one. The great challenge remained. How do you create a screen that is crystal clear, incredibly sensitive, sees multiple touches at once, and is durable enough to live in your pocket? The answer wouldn't come from pressure or physical contact, but from a completely different domain of physics. The answer was electricity. To understand how the modern touchscreen works, we need to discard our most basic intuition. We think of touch as an act of pressure, of force, but the screen on your phone isn't measuring pressure at all. It is, in fact, measuring a disturbance in an invisible, silent field of energy that blankets its entire surface, and the key to creating that disturbance isn't the force of your finger, but the simple fact that your body is a giant bag of salty water. Let's start with a first principle, capacitance. It sounds like a complex, technical term, but the concept is surprisingly simple. At its heart, capacitance is just the ability of something to hold an electrical charge. Think of a tiny battery. A simple version called a parallel plate capacitor is just two conductive plates, like two small squares of metal, placed near each other but not touching. If you connect a battery to these plates, one plate will build up a positive charge and the other a negative charge. An electric field forms in the space between them. For our purposes, all you need to know is that this arrangement can store a little bit of electricity. The amount of charge it can store is its capacitance. Now here's the crucial part. The capacitance, the amount of charge it can hold, can be changed. If you bring another conductive object close to those two plates, without even touching them, you will disturb the electric field between them. This intruder will effectively steal some of the field, changing the amount of charge the plates can store. The system's capacitance changes, and that change can be measured. So who is this conductive intruder? It's you. The human body is mostly water, filled with dissolved salts and minerals. This makes us excellent conductors of electricity. When you bring your finger near that simple two-plate capacitor, you are inserting a new, powerful electrical player into the game. Your body's own ability to conduct and store charge interacts with the field, and the capacitance of the system drops in a predictable, measurable way. This is the first, most fundamental secret of the touchscreen. The screen isn't feeling you push it, it's sensing your electrical influence. You are, from the screen's perspective, a walking, talking conductor of electricity. Now, how do you turn this principle into a screen that can detect a touch anywhere on its surface? You can't just have one giant capacitor. You need to know the exact location. The solution is as brilliant as it is simple. You build a grid. The most common type of touchscreen today is called a projected capacitive, or ProCap screen, and it is built like a microscopic city grid. Engineers take a sheet of glass, and on its surface, they lay down a transparent material that can conduct electricity. This material itself is a minor miracle of materials science, usually a substance called indium tin oxide, or ITO. It's a rare metal that has the bizarre and wonderful property of being both electrically conductive and almost perfectly transparent. It's the invisible ink of modern electronics. Using this invisible ink, they create a grid. They lay down a set of parallel diamond-shaped lines of Ito running in one direction, say horizontally, for the axes. Then they add another layer with lines running perpendicularly, vertically, for the z-axis. These two layers are separated by a thin, non-conductive layer of glass or plastic. At every single point where a horizontal line crosses a vertical line, a tiny independent capacitor is formed. You don't see it, but the surface of your phone is a dense grid of hundreds or even thousands of these discrete sensing points, each one maintaining its own tiny, stable electric field. Deep inside your phone, a dedicated chip, the touchscreen controller, acts as the vigilant guardian of this grid. Think of it as a tiny hyperactive brain whose only job is to monitor the electrical state of the screen. Thousands of times every second, it sends a tiny electrical signal to every single intersection point on that grid, measuring the capacitance at that exact spot. It builds a complete electrical map of the screen's surface. In its normal, untouched state, this map is flat and uniform. Every point reports back the same baseline level of capacitance. It's a sea of tranquility. But then you reach out. Your finger, that conductive bag of salty water, approaches the glass. As your fingertip gets close, within millimeters of the surface, its presence begins to be felt. The electric fields of the nearest capacitors on the grid, which actually extend slightly above the surface of the glass, are disturbed. Your finger couples with the grid, drawing some of the charge away from those specific intersection points. Instantly, the controller sees it. In its frantic, constant polling of the grid, it suddenly gets a different reading. A few of the points on its map, which were all reporting a stable value, suddenly show a drop in capacitance. It's no longer a flat, calm sea. A tiny valley has appeared in the electrical landscape. The controller is programmed to recognize this specific kind of disturbance. It's not a random fluctuation. It's the clear electrical signature of a human finger. By analyzing exactly which X and Y coordinates reported the drop, it can calculate the precise center of that touch with astonishing accuracy. It then sends those coordinates, touch detected at X 243, Y 512, to the phone's main processor, which then translates that location into an action. Launching an app, scrolling a page, typing the letter Q. All of this happens in a handful of milliseconds. From your perspective, it's instantaneous. You touch the screen and something happens. But in that sliver of time, an entire conversation has taken place in the language of electricity. A silent field was disturbed, a change was measured, coordinates were calculated, and a command was sent. This is the core of the magic. And this principle explains so many of the quirks of a touchscreen. Have you ever wondered why it doesn't work if you're wearing regular winter gloves? It's because the cloth or leather is an insulator. It blocks your body's electrical field from reaching the screen. The screen feels nothing because your electrical signature is hidden. This is why special touchscreen gloves have conductive thread woven into the fingertips to provide a bridge for your body's capacitance to the screen. It also explains the common misconception we started with, that the screen works on pressure. It doesn't. You can press on the screen as hard as you want with a plastic pen cap, and nothing will happen. The plastic is an insulator. And this has been a classic tech demo for years, you can operate a touchscreen perfectly well with a sausage. Why? Because a sausage, like your finger, is conductive. It has enough moisture and salt to disturb the electric field. The screen can't tell the difference between a finger and a breakfast food. It only cares about electrical properties. This system is also what makes multi-touch possible. Because the screen isn't just one big sensor, but a grid of thousands of tiny individual ones, the controller can see multiple disturbances at once. When you place 2 fingers on the screen to zoom, the controller doesn't just see a touch, it sees 2 distinct valleys in its electrical map. It tracks the exact coordinates of both of them independently. It then passes that data stream to the operating system, which is programmed to interpret the change in those coordinates. If the 2 points are moving apart, it understands that as a pinch to zoom out gesture. If they are swiping in the same direction, it's a 2-finger scroll. The hardware provides the raw data, the location of multiple conductive objects, but it's the software that gives that data meaning. So, we've deconstructed the core mechanism. We've gone from a magical piece of glass to an invisible grid of capacitors made of a transparent metal, all watched over by a controller that senses the electrical presence of our bodies. It's an ingenious system, a marvel of physics and engineering working in perfect concert. But there's one more layer to this story. There's an unseen giant in this process, a final piece of the puzzle that elevated the capacitive touchscreen from a clever piece of hardware into a truly revolutionary interface. It's the element that truly brought the magic to life. And that element isn't hardware at all. It's software. For years, the basic hardware for multi-point capacitive touch had been in development in various research labs. Engineers knew they could build a grid that could detect more than one touch at a time. But there was a conceptual gap. The hardware could provide the raw data, multiple XY coordinates, but what did you do with it? The world was still thinking in terms of a single cursor, a single point of interaction. Having 2 cursors on screen was confusing, not helpful. The hardware was a solution waiting for the right problem. The breakthrough came from reframing the question. Instead of thinking about multiple points, designers started thinking about multiple points in relation to each other. They started thinking in terms of gestures. The true power wasn't in touching 2 things at once, but in the dance your fingers could do on the glass. The pinch, the spread, the swipe, the rotation. These were actions that felt intuitive and powerful, a new vocabulary for interacting with machines. A researcher named Jeff Hahn gave a now famous TED Talk in 2006, a year before the iPhone was released, showcasing a large, wall-sized multi-touch screen he had developed. In the video, you can see the sheer joy and wonder on his face as he manipulates photos, pulls up keyboards, and paints with all 10 of his fingers. He was effortlessly resizing windows, spinning a 3D model of the Earth, and shuffling through images as if they were physical objects on a table. He wasn't just demonstrating a piece of hardware. He was demonstrating a new paradigm. He showed that the raw data from a multi-touch surface, when interpreted by intelligent software, could become an expressive and fluid medium. This is the unseen giant. The hardware, the capacitive grid and the controller, is the stage. It's a beautifully prepared, highly sensitive instrument. But the software is the music. It's the composer that takes the simple notes of finger down at this coordinate, finger up at that coordinate, and weaves them into a symphony of gestures and actions. It's the software that knows that 2 points moving apart means make this bigger. It's the software that can distinguish between a quick, sharp tap and a slower, more deliberate press and hold. It's the software that performs complex filtering to reject accidental touches, like your palm brushing the edge of the screen while you type. The hardware might detect a dozen different points of contact when your hand rests on the phone, but the software's algorithms are smart enough to analyze the size, shape, and timing of those contacts to figure out which one is the intentional tap of a fingertip and which ones are just noise to be ignored. It is a constant, silent collaboration. The hardware says, "Here's where the electrical disturbances are," and the software says, "I understand, based on their shape, speed, and relationship to each other, this is what the human wants to do." This partnership between the sensitive, invisible grid and the intelligent, interpretive software is the true aha moment of the touchscreen. It wasn't enough to just invent a screen that could feel electricity. The revolution required a new language to be built on top of it. Without the software of gestural interface design, a multi-touch screen is just a very expensive, very complicated button pusher. But together, they dissolve the final barrier between us and our digital lives. They created an interface that doesn't feel like an interface at all. It feels like a direct connection. So let's retrace our steps. We started with the seamless magic of a piece of glass that responds to our every touch. We looked past the common, intuitive, but incorrect assumption that it works by pressure. We dove through the glass and discovered the world beneath, an invisible grid, a microscopic city of transparent electrical wiring, humming with a silent energy. We learned that this grid is a vast array of tiny capacitors, each maintaining its own delicate electric field, and we found that the first principle at play is our own biology. We, as conductive beings, are the key that unlocks the system. Our very presence disturbs those fields in a way the screen's controller can instantly detect, pinpointing our location not by force, but by our electrical influence. And finally, we saw how that incredibly clever hardware, which can track multiple points at once, was only half the story. The true revolution happened when that hardware was paired with equally clever software. Software that could interpret the raw data of our touches and understand the language of gestures, the pinch, the swipe, the tap. Understanding this journey from first principles matters. It shows us that the most transformative technologies are often born not from a single, lightning bolt invention, but from the elegant convergence of multiple ideas. It took breakthroughs in materials science to create a conductor that was also transparent. It took brilliant electrical engineering to design a grid sensitive enough to detect a finger hovering millimeters away. And it took a revolution in software design to give that sensitivity a vocabulary, a way to express human intent. The next time you pull out your phone and swipe to unlock it, take a moment to consider what's really happening. You are not just pushing on a piece of glass. You are engaging in a silent electrical dance. You are reaching out with the faint electrical field of your own body and touching an equally invisible field, humming just beneath the surface of the screen, completing a circuit between the physical world and the digital one. The touch screen didn't just put a computer in our pocket. It wrapped it in an electric skin, creating a connection so direct, so intuitive, it almost feels like an extension of ourselves.
You've been listening to First Principles. Until next time, stay curious.